And then finally, Victoria. Victoria has an amazing technical background in human-on-chip modeling, which is not something I was as familiar with until we hired her. And then I got to hear about the work she did, and it really, truly blew my mind. So what are we actually doing? We're creating a product with the nutrition of breast milk with the practicality of formula. And I think it's important to say practicality because no parent wants to be told you're picking the convenient option or you're picking the easy option. The truth of the matter is that parents are picking the option that fits within the realities of their modern lives, and that practicality is really what's driving their decision making, not because they want to pick something that's maybe inferior nutritionally for their child. It's just the options they have. And so we are able to harness the ability of human mammary epithelial cells to actually create an infant milk product outside of the body that can provide that nutrition, so be nutritionally equivalent, but truly show up the way a parent needs it to behave like formula. And really, it can't come soon enough. We're talking about a $93 billion global infant formula market with 9.5% CAGR year over year. And we see that this is continuing to grow. There's a number of market drivers. Parents are having children later. Women are receiving higher educational attainment, as this call shows, by the number of female faces we have with current ongoing degrees or many in their pocket already. And that we see that there's a lot more family planning and consideration around how parents are going to care for their families. That means that there's a lot of money being spent in this sector. And I think while it's exciting to see a large market size, I think it actually speaks to the problem we're trying to solve, which is that 84% of babies in the US, and it's pretty comparable globally, are fed partially or entirely infant formula within the first 6 months of life. That means that even though we know infant formula is inferior nutritionally, 84% of parents are making the trade-off and the decision to move to infant formula before they should by the recommendation of pediatricians. And they carry a lot of shame and stigma and guilt, especially moms talk a lot about the cognitive dissonance that they experience, really trying to come up with the best way to feed their child. And we just don't think that there has to be trade-offs. There can be more options. When you look at the global impact of a decision like that, if you accumulate all of the infants being fed infant formula in a year, it's about $240 billion in lost global GDP, attributed to people not being able to reach their full cognitive potential because they're being fed infant formula instead of breast milk. And if you're not familiar, which is totally fine, the reason that infant formula just really can't stack up to breast milk is because it lacks a number of macro and micronutrients that are specific to humans. One of those you might have heard of is human milk oligosaccharides, which are critical to immune support. They're really the foundational building blocks of what essentially helps populate your gut microbiome as an infant, which really does have a huge differentiation for your life and how you absorb nutrients and therefore grow and develop, what kinds of allergies and autoimmune disorders you may have in your life, and generally just how you're actually able to develop cognitively as you continue to create tissue in your body. And breastfeeding isn't one size fits all, especially for this audience, which might never have breastfed, myself included. You might think, well, can't women just try harder, or can't they just breastfeed? What's truly the barrier? And honestly, as we've talked to a lot of moms, the barrier is a whole variety of small things that accumulate to making it really, really hard for a lot of moms. For many mothers, it's a beautiful process. It goes really well, and it's one of the most important parts of their bonding experiences. And for other moms, it's really, really hard. Sarah on here is one of my favorite quotes. She was an interview that we did almost 2 months ago, and she's been breastfeeding exclusively for almost 6 months, but she commented, he's getting to an age where he's so wiggly. Keeping him focused during the feed is tricky, and sometimes he doesn't get enough. She said this while he was literally supermaning his little body against her with force, well latched on. And she was like grimacing through the pain, kind of chuckling while talking about this. It's not as though moms don't want to breastfeed. They're trying their best, but for a lot of moms, it's really, really hard. And you see that in small and big ways in their journeys. And as if that weren't enough, as if we haven't told you, hey, it's bad for babies, it's really not great for parents, it's actually pretty bad for the environment to use infant formula. So we see that about 5 to 10% of the liquid global dairy market ends up in infant formula, so bovine milk. And when you attribute that per infant, it's about 4,000 gallons of fresh water a year that's used just to produce that milk, or that ends up being dry, rehydrated, and fed to an infant. Every infant in the world that eats infant formula for a year creates 5,700 metric tons of CO2. And when you put all of the infants together, and this is based on conservative calculations we did, that infant formula in a year, it's about 62 trips, or just in the US, it's about 62 trips around the world that you would be able to take in equivalency in CO2 created because of infant formula. And then I think it's, of course, worth saying, especially living out in the woods here or spending time in Chapel Hill, there's millions of acres continuing to be cleared to have more pasture lands for cows, which means that we're seeing grasslands erode, forests erode, and we're seeing the climate change effects of that. So what are we actually doing? How does it work? That's what everyone wants to know. For us, it's pretty simple in terms of model. So we chat about your breastfeeding journey with a prospective mom or parent. The gender of the cells actually doesn't matter. So one of the really cool things about our technology is once we collect that sample of your mammary cells, we can make men's milk or women's milk, which in some ways is pretty exciting for a lot of parents and pairing couples. We're able to take those cells into our lab here based in Durham, North Carolina, and grow them up to a place where we can populate them into our bioreactor, where they're able to do essentially what they do inside the body, where they line the mammary gland outside of the body. We grow those cells up for 6 to 8 weeks. We start to collect the milk that they secrete and rigorously test that to ensure that it's safe and that can be sent out, package it up, and are able to ship it direct to door of our consumer. Scientifically, we've made a little graphic because otherwise it's kind of hard to explain if you're not someone super well versed in cell biology, which I wasn't before I started here. But essentially, we nourish and nurture the cells so they perform their natural milk production process. So in the body, human mammary epithelial cells line the mammary gland, which essentially means they create, similar to like your skin, a layer on the inside of your body that's able to keep blood on one side, pull nutrients in through their biosynthetic pathways, and secrete out milk out the other side, never intermixing the two. And this is truly, truly the key or special sauce to what we're working on, because milk has 2,500 plus macro and micronutrients in perfect constellation. If you tried to go back and recreate every individual component or had to do a lot of downstream of separation, concentration, purification, you would never have the nutritional equivalency or complexity of milk. So the fact that we're able to harness their ability where they know their tops from their bottoms, they're polarized, and they create this zipper, this monolayer, means that we're able to get milk out the other side and never have any intermixing with our media. So we can create a sterile product that's nutritionally equivalent, but not immunologically equivalent to what would be produced in the body. This first model I've described to you is our personal use, which is where we can actually make custom milk for an individual from their specific cells. When we look at opportunities across the board, there's a whole variety of spaces we're really excited to play in. One is being a retail product, close to my heart. I'm excited to get this into the hands of consumers in low middle income countries, which requires a very specific type of business model. There's also commercial licensing opportunities. We're able to bring other species of milk, so for instance, cow, or maybe even something cool and exotic like camel milk to market, and think about licensing opportunities to do that. And finally, we see biomedical applications. So you have adult immunocompromised populations. So think patients that are undergoing chemotherapy, for instance. Human milk has huge benefits to the immunological system and digestive system of an adult. Or we see also NICU babies, so babies that are born too young, too premature, too little, seeing fortificants to be able to boost up the nutrition that they're getting in a very small amount of liquid. We raised $3.5 million seed round in June and have been currently in it like it's hot to be able to accelerate our technical work and are headed towards our next raise, which will be the Series A somewhere in 2021 or 2022. I always like to point out that you probably, especially if you're local, you may have heard of us, you may have seen an article, and it's not because we're out desperately seeking press, although I do like a little bit of acclaim every once in a while. It really has to do that we've touched a foundational truth. We have touched on something that 50% of the world's population understands very intimately or has understanding from family or friends. We're talking about something that we're finally taking and applying an incredible technology towards problems that are experienced by women and in women's health. And so you see that it's kind of novel, it's kind of sci-fi, but part of the reason you're seeing such enthusiasm or even some questions, like in some of these articles of what are the long-term ethical ramifications of this product, it's because there's a lot at stake, and it's a very emotional space that we're really proud to be able to be representatives of, start conversations about, and help be leaders in. We hope you're latched on, as we always like to say, and I'm happy to answer any questions as we go into this next stage. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Michelle, for that presentation. That was really awesome. I really liked the graphic that you guys had, especially for explaining the cultured milk process. I know I've seen a lot of graphics explaining the cultivation meat process, but not the milk one yet. So I really like that your comms person did really well on that. So we're gonna move on to the chat, to the Q&A. I see no one has had any questions in the chat box yet. So before me and Deeksha ask the questions we've prepared, I'd like to go ahead and ask if anyone has any questions right now. Go ahead and take your speaker off of mute and you can go ahead and ask.
I have a question.
Sure. Can I go ahead, or are we taking turns? Are you calling out people?
Yeah. So actually, if you could take yourself off of mute, and then me and Deeksha will pick on people one at a time. So
you guys
Maddie,
so
if you want to go
orderly.
first.
I am so impressed by how orderly you are. Usually in Q&A, people just like shout things through the Zoom camera and you're like, what did you have? So I love it. Go forth.
Okay, so I'm actually in a doula class right now. So I'm training to be a doula, and we just had our section on breast milk. So first of all, I want to thank you for doing all this, and we learned, as you said, breastfeeding is a different journey for everyone. So this is a really cool alternative. I missed the beginning half because my Zoom crashed. But I was wondering, we learned about the different stages of breast milk and colostrum. How does that come into play with your science? Because I don't really have a lot of background on this particular science. But I did learn about all the different stages of breast milk. So I was curious how which stage this is, or if it's able to be all the different stages, or how that works, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. That's a great question. And I'm going to punt it to Alex and let him take his first shot. And then if I have anything to add, I'll add on.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So this is one of the questions I think Sophia sent to me that she was going to ask, but I think it's important to note that our product isn't breast milk. And that's one of the ways in which we're not going to replicate breast milk. That's a really complex, breast milk varies from person to person. It varies throughout a feed and throughout the months that infant's breastfeeding. And so I don't think we're looking at the moment at replicating that. So I'm not sure what stage we would be, but probably past, we're not going to be colostrum, where it's going to be more like what breast milk resembles a few months into breastfeeding. And yeah, that would be my answer to that.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, as Alex said, you get a variety of milk compositions, even in the same person across a period of time, and it changes with the growth of a child. And so like formula, you see, maybe 0 to 3 or 3 to 6 months or 6 month plus kind of monikers to help guide parents. And similarly, we can think about developmental stages as well in that manner. But he's entirely right that we really, breastfeeding is the best. If a mom can breastfeed as long as possible, we are 100% behind her. We just know for a lot of moms, they're turning to formula, and we can for sure beat formula and feel very confident that we can really raise the bar on the nutritional value that children are getting in that supplemental feeding or kind of bridge space. Great question. And super exciting that you're working on your doula training. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome. So, Manasvi, is that how you say your name? Do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. That is how I say my name.
Cool.
Thank you guys for the presentation. I have questions about the process of starting, if your product moving from ideation to like a product in lab to commercialization. What is that looking like for you as you head to Series A? Do you have a sense of the challenges that you might be facing as you turn more industrial? I know your product still seems a little bit like bespoke to the extent that you're taking someone's selected cells and then processing them. But I'm guessing you're still doing it at the volume that babies drink milk. So what does that look like? I'm finding it hard to picture right now.
You're finding it hard to picture because it doesn't exist. With a lot of the parts of cell ag, scale up is the hardest part by far and away. And we're really no different. We're working right now in a pretty small conformation, so we can produce approximately equivalent to one human mammary gland, or like one woman's production, which is like pretty large an output for this type of technology, even though that sounds kind of laughable. Like the type of technology that we're using, this type of bioreactor, is really designed for pharmaceutical grade, like biologics creation. And so it's really designed to make very small amounts of highly concentrated, like monoclonal antibodies, for instance. And that's not what we're using it for. We're making a huge amount of liquid and a huge amount of volume in a very tight amount of space. So when you think about moving from like a bespoke type model, that one-to-one kind of our approximate bioreactor size and scale up fits pretty nicely with the approximate needs of serving one customer for a period of time. But as you think about like scaling this product to be able to go to other countries around the world, you can't do custom. And so there we're starting to pull actually from other industrial sectors to look at equipment needs that still give us the surface to volume ratios that we need to be able to really give the cells a spot to live. They really like to like pack in tight and feel safe and warm and get all the nutrients they need, kind of like raising kids in some ways. So we need a bigger house, more or less. So we're looking at kind of where we pull from other parts of the industrial sector that have bigger homes. And as we think about other scale up challenges that come with just the consumption of nutrients. So as your kids grow into teenagers, they eat a hell of a lot more food. That's the same for us. And how we actually really like continue to drive that is still unknown. And it's definitely one of our biggest challenges. So as your question about Series A, as you get to Series A, it's really about showing from a techno-economic modeling standpoint, how much can we bring it down? Like comfortably, we can say, yes, we've come from this cost to this cost. And then there's this like theoretical world where you say, if I could build my pilot plant, this is what it would cost me and this is what it would take. And that's really what you have to bring into a Series A to comfortably be able to say, like, haven't built it yet, don't have all the equipment, but I know it's going to cost me approximately this to do it. And I know who is going to help me do it. And that's kind of where we're working towards now for the next couple of months.
Great. Thank you.
Don't be shy. You can just like yell out questions.
Okay. Thank you so much for this presentation. I was just going to ask what the general feedback you've been getting on this from potential consumers and what the major criticisms have been of Biomilq.
Yeah. Honestly, we thought consumer acceptance and consumer socialization was going to be by far and away the hardest. And it's still not easy. I mean, you're asking parents to take their most precious being on the planet and trust them with you. We don't take that lightly at all. That being said, this need is fundamental. And the challenges that women face with breastfeeding is universal across country, creed, class. It doesn't matter. And so because of that, it's been really surprising to us how accepting parents really are of this technology. If they're facing the problem or if they've seen it close up and firsthand, they're willing to try or do anything. Like they will, I mean, for heaven's sakes, a black market for breast milk exists where people will buy milk that could be dangerous for their children to feed them because they think it's nutritionally better than infant formula, which let me tell you, for the love of God, please feed your child infant formula over buying milk that you don't trust the source of. Like if you're getting it from a friend, you trust them, go for it. But like, if not, please don't put your child at risk in that way. But you see that parents are really just so desperate. They hear so much of that reinforcement of the infant formula is bad. It's bad for your kids, which we similarly say it's inferior to breast milk, but there really aren't better options. And so the fact that this could be an option that kind of slots in between that perfect mother's milk and that bridge of like, how do I get my kid to solid food and get them the right nutrition they need? It speaks for itself in a lot of ways. And that's been really powerful. And as we get interview requests, we're doing consumer journey interviews with moms. We're getting them from all over the world. Like I talked to a mom outside of New Delhi 2 weeks ago, in London 2 weeks before that. Next week, I'm talking to a mom in Poland. Like it's not just like a coastal elite US thing. Like this is a problem that all moms want to talk to us about.
Awesome, thank you.
I have a question. I just want to say thank you to the Alt Protein Project team and Biomilq for hosting this. It's a kind of two-part question. The first one is, I just want to clarify, right now you guys are like focusing on personalized milk, but in the future you would probably want to make it available for anybody and everybody at all times?
Yeah, exactly. So the first foray in the custom is very much, it fits with kind of the scale up model we have. And honestly, it fits with the cost profile that this product is first going to start with. But long term, not even that long term, just a year or two after launch, our goal is to move into a more mass retail product, which not to get too deep into science, but what we call like the custom product uses primary cells, which means like genuinely just a cell sample from a person, versus when we look at a more mass product that involves maybe a immortal cell line, or even could have genetic modifications as a part of it. And that's where we can really do some cool stuff to think about, like, how do cells fundamentally operate, and then what are some of the ways that we could make them even more efficient. And that's where you can really unlock bringing the price down quite a bit, and you can make this product significantly more accessible to a lot more moms. So previous to starting Biomilq, and part of the inspiration of really thinking about infant nutrition, I was at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and their private sector partnerships team for a summer. And it was really eye-opening to me to think about, like, what could we unlock nutritionally if we could get this into the hands of moms who need it in for instance, like Bangladesh or Sri Lanka. And when we think about being able to get into those markets, we would never be able to do it in a custom manner. We have to find a way to bring the cost down. So for us, it's not just an imperative of like, it'd be great to bring the cost down because then you can sell more. It's like, you've got to bring the cost down so you can actually get it to parents who need it, and not just end up being another designer product for wealthy people in wealthy countries.
So this is like the second part of my question. I don't know too much about breast milk, but I know with like, if you're doing some transplants with like stem cells, you have issues with like human lysocyte antigens. I don't know if this is a problem with breast milk, if like maybe the mother has something, and if you get like another mother's breast milk, would it affect the child? Is there something that you're thinking about right now?
That's a good question. So the way we grow this breast milk is in a sterile condition. So you're not able to transfer like pathogens, for instance, and you're not able to transfer, you're not transferring like genetic material necessarily, which I think is what a lot of people are always kind of like weirded out by. But human lysocytes is a new one. I haven't been asked about that. So I'll lightly pose it to Alex, although I don't expect him to necessarily know it. And if Layla wants to hop in, although I think she's just listening probably with no camera, I'll open it up. But that's what's your background? You must be a scientist.
I'm in chemical engineering and biochemistry, so somewhere in between the two.
Always bring the stumper questions. That's
sorry about that.
No. We are literally genuinely a team of nerds. In fact, it's kind of a problem sometimes. We have to like shut down the nerdiness and be like, no, focus. You also are trying to run a business. Alex, any thoughts? You want to go to
my first thought is that there are milk banks, and milk banks pool milk samples from women, and those like babies eat those, like drink that. And so, but that, I guess they also have some kind of, I think they pasteurize it, which obviously can degrade the product. And so I don't know that we haven't really talked much about what our downstream, like sort of like, if there is going to be pasteurization or anything like that. But so I guess that's an interesting question. But my first thought was just that like pooled milk exists and that babies drink it and they seem to be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question and something I will look into more.
It's I think it's probably worth noting. So human mammary epithelial cells really just produce the nutritional component mainly. So like you could, for instance, have B cells or something else that might produce like antibodies or produce, or you might have like white blood cells or other things that come through other cellular components, but we're very specific in the cell type that we're using. So we can much more tightly manage that profile because of what they're able to produce. And we're not introducing necessarily, so like in a primary cell sample, you might get all kinds of cells and we'll have to separate them out for what we actually want. But when you're using like an immortalized cell line, you're only selecting for the cells that are creating nutrients that are not bringing with them any other kind of immunological value, which is part of, there's two reasons we like to stress that we're not immunologically equivalent. One is that breast milk is best, and moms should definitely breastfeed if they can, because there's also skin to skin transfer and all kinds of other microbiological benefits that just we are not going to make blanket statement. But the other is that I personally believe the world understands about this much about the immunological value of breast milk. I think like a scientist, we're like, oh yeah, breast milk's great, but like we don't actually know what we're talking about. And so we really kind of, our theory is why Or in what ways should science really understand what every component exactly does? And in some ways, should we just trust the fact that let the cells do the heavy lifting, essentially? So like select for the right cell type, give them their happy, warm environment to grow, give them the right food and the right stimuli to feel comfortable to make milk, but not necessarily, we can't recapitulate the full value. And the moment you start to confer passive immunity or mess with the immune system in general, it gets very complicated and out of the depth of, I think, probably like 99% of the scientists in the world.
Well, thank you for answering that.
Yeah, we totally flubbed it, but I appreciate
Okay.
it. And now we're going to go back and do a whole bunch of research. Email or something in the chat box. We'll probably follow up with you to be like, I want to know more about the publications you've read. We're going to go read about them. That's
the last thing I'll add is I think so like with a transplant, there are cells going to another person's body. Our product probably won't have cells in it, although actual breast milk has a lot of cells. Our product won't have cells in it, so might be a little bit less of a concern. But
maybe I'll message you about this later.
Please do. No, I mean, seriously. Some of our best conversations have started as like, have you ever thought about? And we're like, no, but do you want a job? Like, come talk to us. Like, yes, no, we want to talk to you. We want to talk to you.
All right, sounds good.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of had a follow-up question to that. I was kind of wondering a very similar thing is you mentioned kind of these HMOs, I think, in the beginning. The sugars are kind of the most important part that you're trying to keep in. And you kind of mentioned one application was the immunocompromised adults. And I wanted to just know a little bit more, I guess, mechanism-wise, if possible, like how that could help them, that kind of population out.
Yeah. So HMOs are, before I dive in, are you familiar with how the gut microbiome breaks down nutrients?
Not enough, for sure.
Okay. Well, essentially, HMOs are kind of, you can think of them as kind of like the initial, so in your body, for instance, like when you eat candy, straight candy, let's just go with something easy, right? You're breaking down, you have all of these simple sugars that are very, very easy to use, and they're brain food. They're not good for you. So I'm not saying they're healthy, but like they're immediately converted, and they're actually just like very quick and accessible energy. So they can be converted from caloric content very quickly and be utilized by the body in a whole bunch of cellular processes, which is, I personally think, why the human body is addicted to sugar, but that's a whole nother long conversation. But when you think about like human milk oligosaccharide just refers to that it's a sugar chain. And so essentially there's a whole bunch it's depending on which papers you read, between 100 and 300 of them. But essentially they are the first nutrients that are most easily broken down by some of the initial populations of the gut that are trying to seed. So you get some gut microflora transfer from what babies are getting through milk or what they're getting off of actually the skin tissue of mom. So as gross as it is, the fecal oral transplant pathway in infanthood is very, very important. And so like bifidus bacteria and some of these other really healthy gut bacteria actually come because you're inoculated, because we live in an unclean world, which is becoming a problem actually, which is again, another side conversation that I'm just gonna set over here. But moms are too clean in the modern era is the long story short. But basically these gut bacteria, they're trying to populate, they're trying to take hold, they're trying to be able to reach a quorum sensing capability where they can really set down. And some of these bacteria are actually what help break down more of the complex nutrients to be able to be used. So when you think about, you've got these sugar chains kind of coming through milk that are more accessible, they're easier to break down. There's some of these gut microbiome that are trying to populate, and they're trying to reach a point where they can keep out bad bacteria. So that they're strong enough, they're inoculated at a high enough population that nothing else will grow. And they need those quick little sugars to be able to eat. It's a prebiotic for them. They're able to break them down, eat them, populate, and then they help break down other nutrients. They help seed other healthy gut populations. And that, again, immunological value that the world barely understands, that gut microbiome transfer is much of what helps set what your body responds to in any kind of full like immune system activation. So like that gut is one of the first places that your body starts to learn like, ooh, that's a good thing, or like, ooh, that's a bad thing. And so if you haven't populated that appropriately, you're not getting some of those nutrients. You're not breaking down nutrients as efficiently, which some of those more complex micronutrients are what feed and seed muscular development, bone development, brain development. You're not just turning on the immune response, so you're more likely to get sick. So you don't recognize when bad pathogens are there because you haven't seen them before, and they get hold before your gut or your body responds. And we also see like long-term ramifications that are fascinating and terrible in a lot of ways. So when you think about that in a baby, that's kind of an obvious, like, okay, babies don't have anything else, right? But then you think about an adult immunocompromised patient or even a geriatric patient, they're having the same process undergone. So they're going through chemotherapy, which is killing everything in their body, basically. And it's killing out a huge amount of their natural microflora in their gut. Or in a geriatric population, you lose over time some of the cilia and other things that hold those in place. Your gut smooths, you have like IBS. It's amazing how many people in the world have it, right? And so there's all of these conditions, whether indications, specific conditions, or just the condition of age or the condition of immunocompromising states that people find themselves in, where those fundamental building blocks that are really easy to break down and use are really important and really helpful. And that's where I get like, I am now answering a 10-minute question here, but this is where I get really jazzed, because when you think about like infants, babies, we can fundamentally change the way we feed humanity. And maybe we can be part of the solution that feeds the future Einsteins of the world. But we can also think about maybe making millions of people's lives better by just giving them the milk that our body is designed to consume. So when they need a reset and they need a way to rebuild, we can be the better for you ensure that might be able to exist. And I think like if you look at how fast our population is growing and how fast we have older people who are living longer, this might be another way to unlock a better life for a lot of populations that are aging. And that's pretty exciting. That was so long-winded and tangential.
No,
so
that's great.
Feel free, but you get me late at night. I've been working all day since 6 a.m. and like this is stream of consciousness reality here.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I had like two things. The first one was like, if you guys or when you guys like scale up so that it's like a more commercial based thing, will you still offer the service of customized breast milk?
Maybe. Call me in 5 years. I don't know. I would love to say yes, and I think there's some benefit to yes, but it will kind of depend on whether we want to focus on US or European markets, or how quickly we can really get to other markets who need us, probably.
Okay. And earlier it was mentioned that you guys were going to talk about career opportunities.
Yeah, well, do you have a question? We brought Alex as our scientific emissary because he is the poster child of wanting to work in this sector and landing a job in it. So if you have a question for him, you're welcome to ask.
I guess like, I know it's mostly science-based, but is there more like another side to it besides just like the science with regards to like broadening the company?
Yeah. So we've mostly built out our scientific team at this point, or are building out scientific team. Like Alex, their background's like his, but we are growing quickly. So we have, like I said, we had someone who's working part-time for us, who's coming on full-time now in marketing and communications. And we have a part-time community engagement associate. She does a lot of reach out in lactation communities and building empowerment guides and reworking our FAQs and our press to not sound so sterile and scientific like the rest of our team is. And we definitely, companies like these will always start scientific, and we're very young. It looks like we have it together and we really don't. We've been a company since 2019. But when you think about like next raises, you think about growth, a lot of the roles that grow after that aren't scientific. So it is layering in those communications. It's adding in business development. It's we're adding a regulatory affairs lead right now. So someone who's going to help us with both the human milk side and some of the policy work. And those are the roles that will be exciting in the next year or two that we get to bring on. Plus, it means I'll have more people that aren't all just in the lab all day, which will be a little less lonely.
Alex, can you kind of like share your experience about that?
Yeah, I was actually gonna put in the chat. There's another company, not a cultured milk company. They're called Wild Type. They make cultured salmon, and they have like a blog sort of, and their founder did like an analysis of sort of like the waves of like hiring in this space, or what he's predicting it's going to be. And the next wave is going to be not science focused. And he had like a really good post on that. So I'm going to find it. I'm going to link it in the chat. I think that's probably like the best resource I've ever seen for people with questions about getting a non-technical job in this space.
Awesome. Thank you.
Kilani, is that how I say your name?
Kalani, yeah.
Kilani, what are you focusing on? What's the dream job?
I mean, I'm environmental studies right now. And I guess I'm just like, I've been thinking about going to policy, but I kind of want to like also do something more like direct than like going and dealing with politics. So I'm just kind of like interested in options, and the agriculture industry is something I've always been like really focused on, and I really like the idea of like alternative sources of meat and dairy, because it's like a whole environmental like has such a big impact in that regard. So
yeah, we had an intern this summer who's a master's in environmental management from Duke, and she was helping us do an LCA analysis on some of the components and sources in infant formula. So it's not a full-time role that we can afford, but it's definitely, that's one of the other roles that will be added. And most of these companies are right now being like, look, we're sustainable, but like haven't actually done the math to be able to prove it. So that's where I think when you think about communications, you think about layering into policy and then actually just walking the walk with the talk. That's where some of those roles that definitely slot in for you. If you're interested, I'm happy to try to connect you with our intern for the summer. You can hear
that'd be really cool.
Her experience, if that would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. If you'll put your, if you'll send me your email in the chat, I'll send you one.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Other questions?
Hi, Michelle. My name's Sarah. I am a MBA student, so I'm more on kind of the businessy side of it. This has been super helpful and very interesting. I appreciate your time. One of my questions is more around like your competitive space. You're kind of up against the infant formula side, which, clearly you've got a lot of benefits to prove or to say why you're maybe better than that. But I'm curious as to whether there are any other companies that are doing this type of thing and what kind of protections you have around your process or your work.
Yeah, the all-important IP questions. Yes, we do have provisional patents in place that we're working hard on. I'm looking at Alex because all of our work layers into it so deeply, and he's like, don't ask about IP, we talk about it all the time. There is another competitor in our space, although competitor is kind of a strong term in some ways, but Turtle Tree Labs is in Singapore. They started focusing mainly on cow's milk, and we're really interested in bovine sustainability, kind of replacing animal agriculture, and then saw that human milk was a hell of a lot more profitable and started working on human milk. And I would say like, it's interesting because they teach you like in business school, right? Like, oh, they're your competitor. You have to really worry about them. You have to plan for them. What are your moats? How are you going to get around them? This or that. And one, the sector is huge and there's space for multiple players and no one company is going to do it the same way. So like, you just can't apples to apples compare across the board. Two, technologically, we're doing things similarly, but also pretty differently. So they're using differentiated stem cells to make their products versus we're starting directly with mammary cells. And then they also are doing some like different downstream work than we are, which is pretty fundamental to what the end product is going to look like. And then I think the most important three is that the phrase like all ships rise in a tide actually is true. So I really don't think that this market, like the pathway here is 5 years, probably by the time you realistically get a product are ready to be able to go into regulatory trialing, you go through all of the hurdles that have to be done, you get everything ready to be able to launch. And in that period of time, your one competitor is not going to be the only person there. And so it's less about focusing on that specific, like, how do we build a moat against this? And it's more about thinking, strategically, like what do we as a business want to stand for? What do we want to be able to talk about? What do we want to be able to sell? How do we want to be able to solve the problem? And building, I would say, strategic moats for that opportunity rather than against any one single player. It's actually interesting. I got to meet one of the co-founders of Turtle Tree Labs this week, which we had never spoken, even though we get asked about each other literally probably 5 times a week. And it was delightful. And it was like chatting with a friend. And so like, there's I don't know. It's very strange. Like you always read case studies and it's like company A versus company B, who's going to get there first? And I don't think this is a who's going to get there first. I think it's who's going to get there on their own terms. Again, a very meandering response, but I appreciate the question, Sarah.
No, it was great. And it sounds like too, I mean, location wise, just even in that, you're in such different places of the world, but it sounds in a way like a good, like if you both have similar goals, right, collaboratively, the goal would be to get people using more milk that is more beneficial than infant formula. So cool, thank you.
There are 2 questions in the chat. So one was from Michael. Does liquid milk need to be the primary vehicle for the proteins and other nutrients? Could it be added to other products? And the answer is yes and no. Liquid milk is best because nutritionally you get the most bioactivity in its full form if you don't have to heat treat it or process it. But you can add it to other products. I would really just like to get milk first and then we'll worry about anything else. And then Ignacio asked, what will be your approach to get GRAS approval from the FDA? Are you focusing one molecule at a time as what Perfect Day did? Are you working directly with the whole milk matrix? Ignacio, who are you? Unmask yourself because you must be technical or well-informed in this space. Are you willing to unmute?
Hello. Yes, definitely. I am in a technical dairy R&D work at the moment.
So great question. GRAS approval is, yes, a part of our question and strategy, but it's actually not the most important. I think one important distinction, we are not approaching molecule by molecule. We're not an ingredient, and we're not necessarily moving in a way that would be to try to portion out the value. I mean, that would be just far too complicated for recombination or for approval. So we are trying to go more directly with the whole milk matrix. That being said, none of the frameworks really fit exactly what we are today because most of the products are a simulation of milk and we're milk. So we're actively working with regulatory consultation on some like innovative strategies, both for us, but also for the broader, what will become this human milk segment, to think about what regulatory hurdles have to be there to create ethicism essentially between companies so that we're protecting consumers effectively, because our challenges don't look like infant formula. They don't quite look like the dairy industrial market. They're definitely not the same as biologics or pharma. We're somewhere blended in the middle. And so to some extent, we're going to have to help build the framework that other people will come through the door behind us in. And while I would love to say, I just want to get there first and fastest, we have too much of a conscience, I guess, and are really worried about whatever door you open becomes the door everybody can walk through. And you want to make sure that that is a door you would be comfortable getting a product from that you'd feed to your own child. So we're very thoughtful about regulatory work, and it is very hard and very stressful. So if you're an expert, you should chat with us, but it's a very fair question. Anybody else?
I think there's one more question in the chat. Michael asked, what are some pros and cons of being in North Carolina in the past and in the future?
Pros, rent is very cheap. Pros, we get to have yards, unlike in San Francisco. Oh, did I freeze? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? My jokes are so good. I want to make sure everybody's laughing. Otherwise, it's just really disappointing for me. Pros, 3 amazing universities, all within 40 minutes of each other, that have amazing students and amazing talent. Pros, all of our families and lives are here. Layla has her horses and horse farm, so that would be pretty hard to move. Cons, when we first were fundraising, we were told by people, you're going to have to move to San Francisco or you'll never be successful. And it, like, we kept hearing it and we were like, yeah, okay, whatever. But like, we can't just pick up, like, Layla has kids and a horse farm and I've got a dog and a house and like, we like living here. And I can't move back into an apartment. I just won't. And so it just wasn't going to happen. And we were very clear on like, we're excited to build our company here and we hope people will be willing to move here and be excited to work here. And then I'm probably I don't know, is Alex still here? I don't see
Yeah.
Alex, do you want to comment on what it's like moving to North Carolina? Because we haven't had a problem attracting wonderful talent. Do you want to talk about the first few months as being a North Carolinian?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I'm from New York, and then I went to school in California, so I was like a little bit nervous about moving to like the South. But I'm living in Durham, and I really like it, and I think it's the perfect place to be during a pandemic. It would be the perfect place to be even not during a pandemic. But I'm vegan, so I'm surprised by like how much good vegan food is here, and just like it's just a nice place, and the building we're in is really nice, and just I have no complaints. So, and I think the funny thing also is to see a lot of like these other companies that started in San Francisco starting to move, some to North Carolina even, a lot of them moving to like Minnesota, the Midwest, or starting already in the Midwest, anticipating that like the costs of just being in San Francisco are way too high. That's not even where food is really produced in this country anyway. So I think Biomilq is just like gotten ahead of the curve on that. And North Carolina is a great place to be.
Yeah, I kind of worry our lab rent prices and just like general rent prices are going to continue to go up. So I'm like, it's a great place, but like nobody should come here. Don't come. Like it's not worth it. Because otherwise I secretly think it's going to get more expensive. I think Dr. Trill, you had a question. I saw you raise your hand. Are you still here?
I am. Hey, Michelle, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you both. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Alex. I have a question about the business side of things. So I guess a two-parter. First, on your raise, so getting to your seed round raise, pre-revenue, really pre-product, congratulations. That's amazing. Any amazing like advice that you might have for any other companies that are in that realm? Not that I would know any. And then second is part of your marketing strategy to win hearts and minds of the lactation consulting community. And do you have thoughts on how to best go about that for your kind of business?
Both wonderful questions. So Dr. Trill has her own company, Free to Feed, which she has her sign behind her. She's on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in lactation feeding, you should definitely follow. I look at her posts daily and I'm kind of fangirling right now, which is probably embarrassing because she's probably lately fangirling to meet me in real person. Timing. But fundraising, lactation space, you're going to get really weird questions. So practice schooling your face. Being asked like, is a wet nurse a replacement for your product? Threw Layla and I for a loop in a meeting where we were like, no, tell me more about that. Like what, how? Okay. But I think telling the why is really helpful. Like I was talking to another founder that's working on a lifelike nipple on a bottle set that's really cool. And I think being able to tell the story and the emotional connection, regardless of whether the person you're talking to truly understands the problem you're talking about, they'll get there, because all of these issues that are related to infants, I mean, it's the fundamental driver is love, right? Like, and if you can really harness that and explain that, it's much easier to find investors that resonates with them, that they are mission aligned and that they're going to agree with you, and then they're not going to push you to just try to like make money as fast as possible and never look back, because that's not why you're here. So if you can really express the why, it will shut down some investors and you'll be like, oh, wow, that call didn't go well. And that's a good thing, because it means they were not your person anyway. So I truly believe, like, be yourself, talk about the why as much as possible, like always relate it to the emotional side, even though what you're doing is incredibly technical, keep relating it back to that. And you will find the people that like, they pick up on that and they're really excited by it. Much more easily than if you just gave like a very formal business pitch that people would be like, oh, that sounds nice. And they're not actually going to show you their true colors of whether they're in for the long haul with you or not. And then winning the hearts and minds of lactation community. Well, I like to say that I'd love to not be an enemy of the lactation community. That's really my first fight. We are totally aligned with basically everything the lactation community believes. And yet, because we're going to sell a product that's not breast milk, the whole community thinks that we're just trying to be an evil infant formula company. So we've been doing a lot of work to just try to build rapport with the few folks who are open-minded enough to have a conversation and answer any questions anyone has, which half of our answers will be, we don't know yet, what would you do? And I think that everyone we've gotten a hold of or started to get to really genuinely express that our intentions are true and we need help. We usually can come around to a place of agreement where like, we want what's best for babies. We want what's best for infants. And we might disagree on an approach, but that's okay. Innovation is going to require that people disagree on an approach. And this market is happening. I was talking to someone about Who Code, which for those of you who don't know, there's this fascinating, dark history, twisty history here in the US about advertising infant formula to parents. The US is the only company that refuses to sign on, or the only country, although we act like a company some days. And I was talking to someone about this Who Code, which is run through the UN, and saying, you know, like, we're going to be villainized and demonized by it. And yet, like, we agree, we agree with what it's saying. And so, you know, we're the company that's the friendly face that we want to do what's right. And so like, we're open to those conversations. This sector is going to happen or grow, whether it's us or somebody else. So I feel like lactation community needs to at least learn to choke down the rage and have a conversation with us. And then they can decide to still not like us. I'm fine with it. That's okay. We can agree to disagree, but it's going to happen. So I want to hopefully be the bridge, a company that can be the bridge between the two sides, not just be thrown over the side of it. But anytime you want to reach out and talk fundraising in more depth, let me know. We can have a chat.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. We have 1 minute left. One last question? Burning. I told Alex he'd have all these technical questions, and then I answered a majority of them for him. Poor guy. Sorry, Alex.
Well, since we only have 1 minute left, thank you everyone for joining the Alt Protein Project and Biomilq for the symposium. And thank you so much to Michelle and Alex for sharing your advice.
You're very welcome. If you have any follow-up questions after the event for Alex or I, let us know. The coordinators have our emails. Especially, I would say, if you're interested in the sector and you're a student and you want to learn more about how one gets a job here, Alex is the prototypical person to ask that for. So I'm going to volunteer some of his time to answer questions, or I'm happy to as well. I think we need more people in this space. We need more people excited about this in other parts of the country besides San Francisco. And we're happy to help build that in whatever way we can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we also recorded this meeting, so we will be sending this out to everyone afterwards.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Right. Hey, Desha. You said there was a group at UNC. How would I go about joining that?
Oh, I'll send that in the chat right now.
Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle.
Not a problem. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
So you can go to this link, and then at the top it'll say join, and you can go to the listserv and just sign up for our emails, or to be a committee member too if you want to be more involved.
Okay, sweet. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Bye.
Bye.